Yo, what's up, YouTube? This is Dope Lee again. So today, I want to talk something about, America, China, and Japan, the balances between three different countries and the relationship. Especially, we know that Sanai Takaichi, the new Prime Minister of Japan, finally had a meeting with Xi Jinping. But the meeting was happening in the APEC summit, right, in Korea. And it's pretty short. It's just like about 30 minutes, 30 minutes. This is pretty unprecedentedly short, right? Unprecedentedly short, So I feel like it's something that important about this meeting. Because you see that Sanai Takaichi actually spent much more time with Donald Trump than with Xi Jinping. So what are the signals here? We have to decipher that, right? So now Sanai Takaichi, just emphasize that China is still a very important neighbor of Japan, right? So basically, she's trying to have a welcoming gesture to China to make sure that Japan still want to cooperate with China in many levels of, for example, for the economics, for the education, for the cultural, for the pop culture, for agriculture, communication. So basically, what we're talking about is that Sanai Takaichi, the new Prime Minister of Japan, wants to strengthen the relationship with the CCP China further, okay? Contrary to many people have been predicting that Sanai Takaichi might be pretty tough on China, but, remember that. It's one thing before the final winning of the election that you say something about your political, campaign, campaign words or political campaign slogan. It's another thing that your policy, the really executable policies when you got elected. There's no exception, including Joe Biden and even Donald Trump. Many people think that Donald Trump is a tough guy. Yeah, he is a tough guy, but many people call him Taco right now. Well, that's just for a joke, but he's a good president with a lot of controversies, though. Think about it. He said, we're going to build a great walls, right? Great walls of the southern Mexico-U.S. border. But we still haven't finished the wall building till this day, right? He said, we got to expel all the illegal immigrants. But, that's in progress, see how obvious ICE movements are. And Tom Homan, how hawkish that movement is. That should be the right direction. However, we still haven't finished a lot of this deportation that Donald Trump had promised. This doesn't mean that Donald Trump is a bad president. No, he's not. I don't think he's the greatest president ever, but he's one of the greatest. Because fundamentally he's trying to bring up the greatness of American root culture, American work ethics, right? American family-orientated traditions, which is good, So nobody's perfect, right? He's far from being perfect. He's a unique personality here. Anyway, so even for for Xi Jinping, the same thing, many promises, but has he really finished that? For example, he said, he will drag every Chinese out of poverty line. But can you believe that many Chinese are still living below poverty line? But there's no blinking the fact that maybe to some degree, he indeed improves people's living quality, to a certain degree that it's better than the 1990s or 2000. But remember that, after the COVID-19 striking, right? Chinese economy actually regressed to the starting point. It's like they just trace back to about a decade ago. Many rich people become bankruptcy, they become poor again. So nobody is perfect in the international politics, right? No politician we can totally carry out 100% of what we have promised. We cannot totally execute all the promises, right? If you can execute like 50% of all the promises that you made, I think you're a good president. That's the standard. That's my subjective standard here. Okay, so Sanai Takaichi, before the final election, before she was elected the Prime Minister of Japan, she made a lot of promises, right, against China. But now, look at it, right? She's still seeking cooperation with China and deepen that cooperation. So she said, even for the financial cooperation, right? Economics, financial, education, this and that. But one area she did not mention about national security cooperation with China. She said national cooperation negotiation and national cooperation concern with Chinese, right? So basically, national security is a very important thing, but she would only form a military alliance with American army, with Americans. So basically, this Japan has always been caring about an old policy, right? Economically, Japan want to be self-centered, but also, of course, centered around American as well, because that's pretty like dollar crazy, right? Dollar-centric kind of thing. And then, but also in East Asia, Japan want to deepen its influence, right? Japan never gave up the communication with mainland China, which is CCP China. And Japan want to put more investment there. Japan want to have more international cooperation with CCP Chinese, right? However, on the other hand, Japan's talking about deepen its military cooperation with America, because think about this. Does Japan have a functional military power? I think it is functional at least, but it's not that aggressively functional. China has airship carrier, one by one. We make a lot of they. I do apologize. I still remember my old days in China, okay. Now I'm living in the US, representing USA, right? So they make a lot of aircraft carrier one by one, a lot of new warships every year, right? They're just like, they use a metaphor like dumplings. They just put dumpling in a boiling water. So just like that, right? And then they have a lot of hypersonic missiles, right? They have a lot of new technology, like the naval, like laser weapon, right? To attacking missiles from the enemy's arm, from the enemy navy, right? Something like that. So China has been making a lot of progress military-wise, right? So that's why Japan is kind of, I'm not saying it's like 100% falling behind, but remember that Japan does not produce many of its own advanced weapons. Japan just bought a lot of advanced weapons from America. And so its striking power is diminishing, right? Because Japan does not have such a high technology, large group of high technology military equipment. China can produce that on its own, but Japan has to rely on import from America, which America has better control of Japan. They have to negotiate on terms, and that will be expensive. The Chinese production cost of one fighter jet, for example, J-20, is just like 1/5 or maybe a quarter of the same cost of the high-end fighter jet in America. Think about that. Japan has to double the price, possibly, to buy the same product for a high performance jet. And for the highest performance jet, American will never sell out to anybody. Even for the allies. American would sell the very top tier, but not the most top tier weapon to its allies, right? Think about that. So America needs Japan. Japan also needs America for the cooperation in Eastern Pacific region to really stabilize the region. And also along with align with Australia as well, right? So economically, Japan can negotiate with China, can cooperate with China, or even want to deepen their cooperation with Chinese, right? But for the military power, there's no way. Japan have to align with America. So that's why, many people say, oh, Sanae Takaichi just played a double-sided person, right? It's just like the rat. No. This is a pretty bad metaphor. Sanae Takaichi, she is a pretty wise politician. Just follow the traditional Japanese road. This is what Japan should follow. Japan should follow American economically and military-wise, but Japan should also follow China economically. Try to just balance the different power. Just like a juggler, juggle the balls in between different hands, just like that. So many people are thinking about, so how Japan could develop its own power? Well, Japan might never will. But that does not mean Japan is a weak country, though. It means that Japan's different. Japan's different from the traditionally defined strong power in the world, because Japan's military power can never reach to the level of American and Chinese. Because Japan lost the World War II, and that's under Americans' control. Not in a derogative way, right? I think in a good way. Because American can offer protection to Japanese. They can just focus on the civil industry. They do not have to focus on the military industry. So they would, the focus would be more narrow So they just focus on the pop music, manga, Japanese fashion, the Harajuku fashion. When I was in Tokyo, I went to Harajuku and Omotesando, right? I just wear something very flashy, very flamboyant clothes, and many people, they just give me compliments, right? But that is unthinkable in many streets in the world. In other places, you might get bullied, you might get attacked just because, you as a guy wear a pair of stocking, which is super sexy. Maybe that's too sexy. Okay, even though, I'm not afraid of fight, but what about they just gang you up? 100 people fight you. Even you're Mike Tyson, you will lose a fight. Japan is such a civilized country and modern country, which is pretty fashionable, with a lot of high technology, with a lot of avant-garde, fashion art, which I like. Harajuku. Harajuku is my senshi, right? Is my heaven, fashion heaven for me. So anyway, then China now, you can think about, many people criticize China, criticize CCP, China, including me. Of course, I dislike CCP, but you have to admit that nobody can really ignore the CCP power. Nobody can really ignore the rise of CCP. Even, for me as an asylum seeker, that's the CCP power I'm afraid of. Because if CCP is such a powerful political party, I'm afraid of prosecution, even in New York, USA, right? I'm afraid of maybe they will send out some overseas police to track me down and try to hurt me, or try to, control me mentally or something like that, or try to threaten me to stop talking bad about CCP. So, that. So the rise of CCP is good for the CCP lovers, but it's a curse for many CCP haters anyway. But objectively, nobody can ignore CCP China right now. Nobody can ignore Xi Jinping right now. That's a fact. Also for Donald Trump, and what did Donald Trump gain from the East Nation visit to the Pacific, to the APEC summit, right? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Donald Trump buy time for American growth. Think about this. Jason Wang had drinking beer with the the tycoons in South Korea, that Taifa, which means the big tycoons, who oligarchs or something like that. Just like that's the same analogy. The oligarchs are controlling the whole country of Russia. So the CEO of Samsung. Not a CEO, I'm sorry, the director, Samsung, and a lot of, like LG, they are the oligarchs of South Korea. And Jason Wang has been drinking beer, having some French fries, drinking beer with these guys. Think about that. They're just like the top tier guy in East Asia, right? So basically, without the free economy and powerful economy, Jason Wang can never become Jason Wang today. You know what I'm talking about? So many people are thinking about, America's going to have a downfall. No. America will still boom its economy, which I have 100% confidence on America. I bet my future on this land. It's land of freedom of opportunity. Okay? So now I bet, for the crypto market, and for American stock market, it's gonna rise, at least for several days, at least, after the APEC, after Donald Trump bring a lot of good news back home here, right? Donald Trump is back home for Halloween, The White House has been decorated with all the pumpkins, even the God soldiers, they dress up like one of the rules there, So don't get me wrong, I don't know how the God soldiers dress, I just guess, right? But we have a lot of pumpkins there. A lot of rascals, little kids. So basically, I think the world is becoming a better place right now because everybody's having conversation with each other, right? So we're not living the COVID-19 years anymore because back in the 3 or 5 years ago, everybody's in hatred with everybody. Everybody hated everybody. So now everybody began to suddenly love everybody, which is good. Okay, I hope this trend continue. So finally, what's the role between, Japan, CCP China, and America? I feel like they are the top three. I'm not talking about GDP per capita, right? Because GDP per capita, China is still the same level as with Mexico. I don't know, maybe it's even slightly lower for the GDP per capita, but it's not the worst. However, for the general GDP, the gross national product, or the gross domestic product in the general GDP, China is the number 2, America is number 1, Japan is number 3, right? So they're the biggest 3 players. And if they're uniting with each other, not 100% uniting with each other, because they do have some ideology difference, right? Because CCP China is the feudalistic, bureaucratic, control freak, so-called socialism. It's not a real socialism, right? America is more like a free, wild, and liberalized economy with heavy regulations as well. American does have regulation, don't get me wrong. And Japan is more like the traditional Oriental thinking, like being polite, kind of free economy, something like that. This is my metaphor. They are uniting together, but they also respect each other's differences, which is a good thing. For me, as a CCP asylum seeker, I want to run away from CCP. I'm perplexed. On one hand, I feel like, wow, I'm proud of being Chinese. There's no blinking the fact that ethnically, I'm still Chinese. Ethnically, I still have the blood of Chinese. I love Chinese culture originally, right? On the other hand, CCP is not a good thing for me personally. It's not a good thing for many people either. Many prosecuted people. The Uyghurs, and this is also what Sanae Takaichi has been emphasizing to Xi Jinping in his short 30-minute conference, right? It say, of course, we want to cooperate with you, but we still condemn the deed that you did against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, right? The Muslims, right? So you're trying to persecute, you're trying to eradicate they're trying to brainwash them to believe in CCP instead of their own religion. This is something that's not supposed to be happening. You should not be controlling their mind. They should just make them to have their own decision, right? You cannot force them to accept something. And then Hong Kong, right? You cannot send the troops there to tranquilize them. You cannot send the troops there in a trying to use the tanks against them, just like a 1989 Tiananmen massacre, things like that. So Japan still have something to condemn China, because that's not just all the human needs, human rights protection, right? Not just for the righteousness of human rights, trying to defend that concept. This is very fundamental, right? But also to make Xi Jinping know that, okay, we still have our principle. Do not treat our country as your subsidiary. Do not treat me as your, subordinate. Excuse my English, yeah. Do not treat our country as your subordinate, So we have to treat each other, respectfully, right? See each other as equal, So this is very important. So in the long run, I feel like it's still very happy to live in Japan. Japan is a very peaceful country, and it's very safe. It's really safe, ultimately safe. And also it's very fashionable. So I feel like if this trend continue in the future, I'm thinking about maybe CCP China might be democratized. I don't know. Forgive me for fantasizing about that, because I'm a person who loves daydream, just like Curtis Blow, like daydreaming. I want CCP to democratize, but I know it's impossible, but I'm looking forward to that day. Yeah, something like that, Okay, that's my sharing of my content today. See you guys next time. Ciao.